The busy halls of Atlanta General Hospital buzzed with activity on a warm Tuesday morning. Rachel Thompson hurried through the corridor, her comfortable nursing shoes squeaking against the polished floor as she balanced a stack of patient files in her arms. At 32, she was one of the most respected nurses on the floor, known for her gentle touch and kind heart. "Rachel, you're needed in room 205, Sarah, the head nurse, called out. "New patient just came in for his regular physical therapy session." Rachel nodded, quickly organizing her files at the nurse's station before heading to room 205. As she approached the room, she could hear a deep, warm laugh coming from inside. The sound made her smile even before she entered. Inside, she found a handsome man in a wheelchair, dressed in a neat blue button-down shirt and dark slacks. His bright eyes met hers as she walked in, and for a moment, Rachel felt her heart skip a beat. The man looked to be in his mid-30s, with strong shoulders and a friendly face that lit up when he smiled. "Good morning," Rachel said, picking up his chart. "I'm Nurse Thompson, but you can call me Rachel." "Marcus Bennett," he replied, extending his hand. "And you've just made my day brighter, Rachel." Rachel felt her cheeks warm at his comment, but kept her professional composure. As she checked his vitals, Marcus told jokes and asked her questions about her day. She learned that he had been in a construction accident 2 years ago, which had left him unable to walk. Despite this, his spirit seemed unbroken. "You know," Marcus said while she checked his blood pressure, "being in this wheelchair has taught me to see life from a different perspective, literally and figuratively." Rachel couldn't help but laugh at his wordplay. She noticed how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and how he used his hands expressively when he talked. Later that day, in the break room, Rachel's colleague Jenny approached her with a concerned look. "I saw you with the patient in 205, Jenny said, stirring her coffee. "Be careful, Rachel. Dating someone with a disability isn't easy. Plus, you know how some people around here can be about mixed relationships." Rachel frowned at Jenny's words. "I'm not dating anyone," she replied firmly. "And even if I was, someone's disability or race wouldn't matter to me. What matters is what's in their heart." Over the next few weeks, Marcus came in regularly for his therapy sessions, always requesting Rachel as his nurse. They shared stories during his visits. He told her about his work in software development, which he managed from home, and she shared tales about her large, loving family in Georgia. One day, while helping Marcus with his exercises, he asked her a question that changed everything. "Rachel, I know this might be unprofessional, but would you like to have coffee with me sometime? Outside the hospital, I mean." Rachel paused, her heart racing. She knew it wasn't conventional, a black nurse dating a white patient, especially one in a wheelchair. People would talk, but something about Marcus made her want to take that chance. "I'd like that," she answered softly. As Rachel helped Marcus back into his wheelchair, she noticed other nurses watching them, whispering among themselves. But for the first time in her life, she didn't care what others thought. There was something special about Marcus Bennett, something that went beyond his disability or their different backgrounds. That evening, as Rachel drove home, she couldn't stop smiling. She thought about Marcus's laugh, his clever jokes, and the way he faced his challenges with such grace. Her mother had always told her that love comes in unexpected packages, and maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something beautiful. What Rachel didn't know then was that this simple meeting, this ordinary day at Atlanta General Hospital, would lead to the most extraordinary journey of her life. Marcus Bennett would not only change her perspective on love, but would also give her the biggest surprise she could ever imagine. But for now, she was just a nurse who had met a patient, two souls connecting in the most unexpected way in a busy hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. The small coffee shop on the corner of Pine Street became Rachel and Marcus's favorite meeting spot. On their first date, Rachel arrived early, nervously adjusting her yellow sundress. She watched through the window as Marcus wheeled himself up the ramp she had specifically checked for when choosing the location. Her heart fluttered when he smiled and waved at her. "I hope you haven't been waiting long," Marcus said as he positioned his wheelchair at the table. "Traffic was horrible today." Rachel shook her head, smiling. "I just got here myself." That was a small lie, but she didn't want to admit she'd arrived 20 minutes early out of excitement. As they talked over steaming cups of coffee, Rachel discovered that Marcus was far more than his disability suggested. He owned a successful software company that he ran from his home office, creating programs that helped other people with disabilities navigate their daily lives better. I never wanted the accident to define me, Marcus explained, stirring his coffee, so I turned it into something positive. Now I help others who might be struggling with similar challenges. Rachel felt herself falling deeper into conversation with him, almost forgetting they were in a public place until she noticed the stairs. An elderly couple at the next table kept glancing their way, whispering behind their hands. A group of teenagers by the window weren't even trying to hide their curious looks at the interracial couple, one of whom was in a wheelchair. Marcus noticed Rachel's slight discomfort and reached across the table to take her hand. "Hey, let them look," he said softly. "They're just jealous that I'm having coffee with the most beautiful woman in Atlanta." His words made Rachel laugh, the tension melting away. That was what she admired most about Marcus, his ability to face everything with humor and grace. Over the next few weeks, they spent more time together. Marcus showed Rachel his home office, where multiple computer screens displayed complex coding projects. She was impressed by how he had adapted his workspace to his needs, with everything within easy reach from his wheelchair. "Most people see the chair first," Marcus said one evening as they watched the sunset from his back porch. "They think it means I can't do things, but I just found different ways to do them." Rachel understood what he meant. At the hospital, some of her colleagues had started treating her differently. The whispers in the break room didn't go unnoticed. Comments about how she was settling, or how hard it must be to date someone with a disability. "You know what they say at work?" Rachel told Marcus, deciding to be honest about it. "They think I'm making my life harder by dating you, not just because of the wheelchair, but because we're different races too." Marcus squeezed her hand. "And what do you think?" "I think they don't know what they're talking about," Rachel replied firmly. "Being with you is the easiest thing I've ever done." Their relationship grew stronger with each passing day. Marcus showed up at the hospital sometimes during Rachel's lunch breaks, bringing her favorite sandwich and making the other nurses smile despite their previous judgments. Rachel helped him organize his home office better, adding her nurturing touch to his technical world. One Sunday, they went to Rachel's family dinner. Her mother, Linda, had been hesitant at first, but Marcus won her over with his charm and intelligence. By the end of the evening, Linda was showing Marcus old family photos while Rachel's younger siblings taught him their secret handshake. "He's different from what I expected," Linda told Rachel as they washed dishes later. "He sees you, really sees you." Rachel smiled, knowing her mother was right. Marcus saw past everything, her insecurities, her fears, her doubts. Just as she saw past his wheelchair and their different backgrounds to the amazing man he was. What Rachel didn't know yet was that Marcus had more surprises in store. As their love grew stronger and the barriers between them crumbled, she was about to discover that the biggest surprise of all was still waiting in the wings, ready to change their lives forever. 6 months flew by like pages in a wind-blown book. Rachel and Marcus's love story blossomed into something beautiful that neither of them had expected. Their weekends were filled with laughter, shared dreams, and quiet moments that meant everything. On a peaceful Saturday evening, Marcus invited Rachel over for what he called a special dinner. When she arrived at his house, she found the pathway lined with twinkling lights. Marcus had positioned tea lights along the wheelchair ramp, creating a magical entrance. "You did all this?" Rachel asked, taking in the beautiful scene. "I had some help," Marcus admitted with a smile. "My neighbor Mrs. Johnson is quite the romantic. She spent 2 hours helping me set up these lights." Inside, the dining room had been transformed. The table was set with fine china that Marcus explained belonged to his grandmother. A delicious smell wafted from the kitchen, where a professional chef, a friend Marcus knew from his college days, was putting final touches on their meal. "I wanted tonight to be perfect," Marcus said, wheeling himself to the table. He looked handsome in a crisp black suit, his eyes shining with excitement and something else Rachel couldn't quite read. They enjoyed a wonderful dinner of Rachel's favorites: grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and chocolate mousse for dessert. Marcus seemed nervous, dropping his fork twice and checking his pocket several times when he thought Rachel wasn't looking. After dinner, Marcus suggested they move to the back porch, their favorite spot where they had shared so many important conversations. The evening air was warm, and the stars were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Rachel," Marcus began, his voice slightly shaky, These past 6 months have been the most amazing time of my life. Rachel smiled, reaching out to hold his hand. Mine too, she said softly. When I had my accident 2 years ago, I thought my life was over, Marcus continued. I lost my ability to walk, and I thought I'd lost my chance at real happiness too. But then you walked into room 205, and everything changed. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Rachel's heart started beating faster as he opened it, revealing a beautiful vintage ring with a sparkling diamond surrounded by smaller sapphires. This ring belonged to my grandmother, Marcus explained. She told me to save it for someone special, someone who could see past the surface and love what's inside. His eyes grew misty as he continued. Rachel Thompson, you're the most caring, beautiful, and incredible person I've ever met. Would you make me the happiest man in the world and become my wife? Rachel felt tears rolling down her cheeks. In that moment, she saw their whole future together, the love they would share, the challenges they would overcome, the life they would build. The wheelchair, their different backgrounds, what other people might think. None of it mattered. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, Marcus, yes. Marcus's hands trembled as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her all along. Rachel leaned down to kiss him, and in that moment, everything felt right in their world. They spent the rest of the evening calling their loved ones to share the news. Rachel's mother cried happy tears, and her siblings cheered so loudly she had to hold the phone away from her ear. Marcus's parents' reaction was more subdued. They sent their congratulations via text, explaining they were in a business meeting and would call later. As Rachel drove home that night, she couldn't stop looking at the ring on her finger, watching it catch the streetlights. She thought about how love had found her in the most unexpected way, through a chance meeting with a patient in room 205. What she didn't know was that this engagement was just the beginning. The biggest surprise of her life was still waiting, ready to be revealed at their first family gathering. But for now, Rachel was simply a bride-to-be, floating on cloud nine, dreaming of her future with the man who had captured her heart completely. Little did Rachel know that Marcus had more secrets than just this romantic proposal up his sleeve. Secrets that would soon change everything she thought she knew about him. The months leading up to the wedding kept Rachel and Marcus busier than they had ever been. Their small apartment was filled with bridal magazines, color swatches, and endless to-do lists. Rachel had moved in with Marcus 2 weeks after their engagement, determined to start their life together right away. "What do you think about these flowers?" Rachel asked one evening, showing Marcus pictures of different bouquets on her tablet. She sat on their comfortable couch while Marcus looked at the images from his wheelchair position beside her. "The white roses are beautiful," Marcus said, then added with a grin. "But honestly, you could walk down the aisle carrying a bunch of dandelions and still be the most beautiful bride in Georgia." Rachel playfully swatted his arm, but her heart warmed at his words. These quiet evening planning sessions were her favorite part of the wedding preparations, even when they highlighted some of the challenges they faced. Linda, Rachel's mother, visited often to help with the planning. One afternoon, while Marcus was on a business call, she voiced her concerns to Rachel in the kitchen. "Baby, are you sure about this?" Linda asked, her voice soft but worried. "Marriage is hard enough without extra challenges. Have you thought about the future? About children?" Rachel stopped stirring the tea she was making and turned to face her mother. "Mom, I love him. We talked about everything. Children, our future, all of it. Marcus's disability doesn't define our relationship." Linda sighed, patting her daughter's hand. "I just want you to be happy, sweetheart. And I worry about how some people might treat you. A black woman married to a white man in a wheelchair. People can be cruel." "Let them be cruel," Rachel replied firmly. "We're stronger than their judgment." Meanwhile, Marcus's family remained strangely distant. His parents, successful business owners according to Marcus, always seemed to have an excuse for missing planning meetings. They sent expensive gifts, a crystal vase, a set of fine china, but never appeared in person. "They're just busy with work," Marcus would say whenever Rachel brought it up, but she noticed how his smile didn't quite reach his eyes when he talked about his family. The wedding venue posed another challenge. They needed to find a place that was not only beautiful but also completely wheelchair accessible. After visiting several locations, they found a historic garden with recently added ramps and elevators, perfect for their needs. One day, while trying on wedding dresses with her sisters and best friend Sarah from the hospital, Rachel overheard two other brides whispering and looking her way. "Isn't that the nurse who's marrying the disabled guy?" one whispered. "Such a shame. She's so pretty, too." Rachel's sister Karen, always the fierce one, turned to confront them, but Rachel caught her arm. "Don't," she said. "Their small minds can't understand our big love." The dress she chose that day was perfect. A beautiful A-line gown with delicate lace details that would look stunning whether she was standing or sitting next to Marcus in his wheelchair for photos. The guest list became another source of tension. Marcus's side was surprisingly small, with mostly business associates and a few college friends. His parents had sent a list of people they wanted invited, all seemingly important business connections, but hadn't confirmed their own attendance yet. "Are you sure they'll come to the wedding?" Rachel asked Marcus one night as they reviewed the RSVPs. Marcus wheeled himself to the window, looking out at the city lights. "They'll be there," he said, but something in his voice sounded uncertain. "They're just different from your family, more reserved." What Rachel didn't know was that Marcus spent his nights making mysterious phone calls after she went to bed, speaking in hushed tones about arrangements and surprises. He was planning something big, something that would change everything, but for now, he kept his secrets close. As their wedding day approached, Rachel focused on the joy of marrying the man she loved, pushing aside her worries about his distant family and the challenges they faced. She had no idea that the biggest surprise of all was still waiting, ready to be revealed when she least expected it. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and beautiful over Atlanta. Early sunlight streamed through the windows of the bridal suite at the historic garden venue, where Rachel sat in front of a large mirror while her mother arranged her veil. "You look like an angel," Linda said, her eyes filling with tears as she pinned the last pearl-tipped hairpin in place. Rachel's sisters bustled around the room, arranging her train and checking their own bridesmaid dresses in soft lavender. Rachel's heart fluttered with excitement and a touch of nervousness. She checked her phone again, still no message from Marcus's parents. Last night, they had sent an email explaining that an emergency business meeting would prevent them from attending the wedding. Marcus had taken the news quietly, but Rachel had seen the hurt in his eyes. "Your makeup will run if you cry," Karen, her youngest sister, warned as she touched up Rachel's lipstick. "Save the tears for when you see Marcus in his tux." In another room of the venue, Marcus was getting ready with his best man, David, a friend from his software company. The room had been specially chosen for its accessibility, with wide doorways and plenty of space for his wheelchair to maneuver. "The rings are secure," David assured Marcus for the 10th time that morning. "And the special surprise is all set for the reception next week. Rachel won't suspect a thing." Marcus nodded, adjusting his bow tie. "I hate keeping secrets from her," he admitted. "But it will all be worth it soon." At 11 o'clock, the garden was filled with the soft sound of string music. White chairs lined the wheelchair-accessible aisle, which had been covered with a white runner and scattered with rose petals. Most of the seats were filled on Rachel's side, aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends from the hospital. Marcus's side was notably emptier, with just a few business associates and college friends. The ceremony began with Rachel's young niece spreading flower petals down the aisle. Then, the music changed to the wedding march, and everyone stood. Rachel appeared at the garden entrance on her father's arm, and a collective gasp went through the crowd. She was stunning in her white gown, which flowed around her like a cloud. The sunlight caught the delicate beading on her bodice, making her sparkle as she walked. But it was her smile, radiant and full of love, that truly took everyone's breath away. Marcus waited at the altar, his wheelchair positioned perfectly under an arch of white roses. When he saw Rachel, tears filled his eyes. In that moment, he forgot about his absent parents, about the secrets he was keeping, about everything except the beautiful woman walking toward him. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered when she reached him. Rachel's father kissed her cheek and placed her hand in Marcus's. The ceremony was simple but moving. They had written their own vows, and there wasn't a dry eye in the garden when Marcus spoke about how Rachel had brought light back into his life after his accident. Rachel's voice shook with emotion as she promised to love him through all of life's challenges, in sickness and in health, in a wheelchair or not. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister announced. Marcus pulled Rachel down gently for their first kiss as a married couple, and their guests erupted in applause. The reception was held in the garden's beautiful glass conservatory. Rachel and Marcus shared their first dance, with Rachel sitting on Marcus's lap as he skillfully maneuvered his wheelchair in time to the music. They had practiced this dance for weeks, and it was perfect. As the evening went on, Marcus seemed both happy and distracted. He kept checking his phone and having quiet conversations with David. Rachel noticed but was too caught up in the joy of the day to worry about it. Next week, Marcus promised her during a quiet moment, at the family gathering, everything will make sense. I have something important to show you. Rachel kissed him softly. As long as I have you, nothing else matters, she said. Little did she know that the biggest surprise of her life was just days away. The family gathering would reveal secrets that would change everything. But for now, she was simply a happy bride, dancing with her new husband under the twinkling lights of their perfect wedding day. A week after their magical honeymoon in the Caribbean, Rachel and Marcus settled into their new routine as a married couple. Their small apartment was filled with unopened wedding gifts and fresh flowers, reminders of their beautiful ceremony. But something was different about Marcus. He seemed more nervous than usual, constantly checking his phone and making mysterious calls when he thought Rachel wasn't listening. One morning, while Rachel was making coffee, Marcus wheeled himself into the kitchen with an elegant cream-colored envelope in his lap. "This came today," he said, his voice slightly shaky. "It's the invitation to my family's annual gathering at the estate, next Saturday." Rachel took the envelope, admiring the gold lettering and thick paper. "Estate?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I thought your parents lived in a regular house in the suburbs." Marcus cleared his throat. "There's a lot about my family I haven't told you yet," he admitted. "I wanted you to love me for who I am, not for other things." Rachel sat down at the kitchen table, looking at her husband with concern. "Marcus, you're starting to worry me. What's going on?" "Trust me," he said, taking her hand. "Everything will make sense on Saturday. I just need you to pack something nice to wear, really nice. And maybe don't open any social media or business news websites until then." That week was filled with strange moments. Marcus spent hours in his home office with the door closed, talking in hushed tones on video calls. Rachel overheard fragments of conversations about preparations and security arrangements. When she asked about it, Marcus would smile nervously and change the subject. At the hospital, Rachel tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept wandering to Marcus's odd behavior. During her lunch break, she tried searching his family name online, but surprisingly found very little information. "Maybe they're in some kind of witness protection program," joked Sarah, her colleague, when Rachel shared her concerns. "Or maybe he's secretly a prince." Rachel laughed it off, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. Every night, Marcus would hold her close and whisper how much he loved her, how grateful he was that she had chosen him, wheelchair and all. On Friday night, the day before the gathering, Rachel was folding laundry when she found a piece of paper that had fallen from Marcus's jacket pocket. It was a physical therapy schedule, dated for the past 6 months. When she asked him about it, he turned pale. "It's just routine maintenance," he said quickly, wheeling himself to the bedroom. "Nothing important." That night, Rachel barely slept. She watched Marcus tossing and turning beside her, mumbling something about walking and surprising in his sleep. What was he hiding? Why all the secrecy? Saturday morning arrived with a mix of sunshine and nervous energy. Marcus insisted they take his specially adapted van, even though he usually preferred using her car. As they drove out of Atlanta, Rachel noticed they were heading toward the wealthiest part of Georgia, where mansions sat on sprawling estates. "Marcus," Rachel said softly, watching as they passed through massive iron gates with a stylized B worked into the design. "Where exactly are we going?" "Home," he replied, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering controls of his van. "My family's home." The driveway seemed endless, winding through manicured gardens and past a private helicopter pad. Rachel's heart began to race as she spotted several luxury cars parked in front of what could only be described as a mansion. "Before we go in," Marcus said, parking the van, "I need you to know something. Everything I told you about myself, who I am, what I believe in, how I feel about you, that's all true. The only things I haven't been honest about are, well, you'll see." Rachel looked at her husband, this man she loved who suddenly seemed like a stranger. "Marcus, you're scaring me a little." He reached for her hand, his eyes filled with love and worry. "Don't be scared. Just remember that I love you, and everything I did was to make sure that love was real." As they prepared to enter the mansion, Rachel had no idea that in the next few minutes, her entire world would be turned upside down. The biggest surprise of her life waited just beyond those grand double doors. The massive front doors of the Bennett estate swung open, revealing a grand entrance hall that took Rachel's breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from soaring ceilings, and priceless artwork adorned the walls. A team of uniformed staff stood at attention, bowing slightly as Marcus wheeled himself in with Rachel by his side. "Welcome home, Mr. Bennett," said an elderly butler, his British accent crisp and proper. "Your parents are waiting in the grand salon with the other guests." Rachel's mind was spinning. This wasn't the modest family gathering she had expected. Through the open doorways, she could see people in expensive suits and designer dresses mingling in various rooms. Some faces looked strangely familiar, like she had seen them in magazines or on TV. "Marcus," she whispered, gripping his shoulder. "What's going on?" Before he could answer, a distinguished-looking couple approached them. The man wore a perfectly tailored suit that probably cost more than Rachel's yearly salary, while the woman was draped in elegant designer clothing and jewelry. "Son," the man said warmly, "finally bringing your bride home." He turned to Rachel with a kind smile. "I'm James Bennett, and this is my wife Victoria. We're so sorry we missed the wedding, but that merger in Tokyo couldn't wait." Rachel's eyes widened as realization began to dawn. She remembered seeing James Bennett's face on the cover of Business Weekly at the hospital. He was the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the world. You're, she stammered, but couldn't finish the sentence. Victoria Bennett stepped forward to embrace her. "We're your new family, dear. Welcome to Bennett Tech Industries." The room seemed to spin around Rachel. Bennett Tech Industries was a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Their software and technology were used worldwide, and Marcus was their heir. Just as Rachel was trying to process this information, something even more shocking happened. Marcus placed his hands on the arms of his wheelchair and began to move. "There's something else you need to see," he said softly. Slowly, carefully, Marcus pushed himself up from the wheelchair. Rachel watched in astonishment as her husband, the man she had known only in a wheelchair, rose to his full height and took a shaky but definite step toward her. The room fell silent. Rachel's hands flew to her mouth as tears filled her eyes. "The construction accident was real," Marcus explained, taking another careful step, "but I've been in physical therapy for the past 6 months. The doctors said I might never walk again, but I was determined to stand beside you as an equal. I wanted to surprise you today, in front of everyone." Rachel couldn't speak. Her heart was overflowing with too many emotions to name. "I know I should have told you everything," Marcus continued, now standing directly in front of her. "About my family's wealth, about the therapy. But when I met you in that hospital room, you were the first person in years who saw me as just Marcus, not as the Bennett heir, not as the guy in the wheelchair. You loved me for me." James Bennett stepped forward. "We kept our distance because Marcus asked us to. You wanted to be sure his relationship with you was genuine, not influenced by our family's position." Victoria dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "And we've watched how you loved our son, supported him, stood by him. You're exactly what this family needs, someone real, someone true." Rachel looked around the grand room, at the wealthy and powerful people watching them, then back at her husband, standing tall before her. In that moment, she understood everything: the secret phone calls, the mysterious meetings, the distant family. "You could have told me," she said softly, touching Marcus's cheek. "Would it have changed anything?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. Rachel smiled through her tears. "Not a single thing. I fell in love with Marcus Bennett, the kind, funny, amazing man in room 205. The wheelchair didn't matter then, the money doesn't matter now." Marcus pulled her into his arms, standing strong and sure, and kissed her in front of everyone. The room erupted in applause. They barely heard it. "I have one more surprise," Marcus whispered in her ear. "But that can wait until tomorrow. For now, let me introduce my wife to the world." Rachel held tight to her husband, still amazed to be standing eye to eye with him, ready to begin this new chapter of their incredible love story. The morning after the grand revelation, Rachel woke up in a bedroom larger than her entire first apartment. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the elegant furnishings of the Bennett estate's guest suite. For a moment, she wondered if it had all been a dream. But then Marcus walked into the room, walked, not wheeled, carrying a breakfast tray, and she knew it was all wonderfully real. He moved slowly but confidently, his months of secret physical therapy evident in each careful step. "Good morning, Mrs. Bennett," he said with a smile, setting the tray on a nearby table. "Did you sleep well?" Rachel sat up, still amazed to see him standing. "I kept waking up to make sure yesterday wasn't just a dream," she admitted. "I still can't believe you can walk, and that you're basically a prince of the tech world." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hand. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about, the last surprise I mentioned." He reached for an envelope on the breakfast tray and handed it to Rachel. Inside, she found documents for a new charitable foundation, the Bennett Thompson Accessibility Initiative. "I want to use our family's resources to help others with disabilities," Marcus explained, his eyes shining with excitement. "Building accessible technology, funding research, providing support for families. And I want you to run it with me." Rachel's eyes filled with tears as she read through the foundation's mission statement. The initiative would focus on making technology and healthcare accessible to everyone, regardless of their physical abilities or financial status. "You can keep your nursing job if you want to," Marcus added quickly. "But I thought, with your experience in healthcare and your genuine care for people—" "Yes," Rachel interrupted, throwing her arms around him. "Of course I'll help run it with you." Later that morning, as they walked slowly through the estate's gardens, Marcus's parents joined them. James and Victoria Bennett looked different today, more relaxed, less formal than during yesterday's gathering. "We have a confession to make," Victoria said, linking her arm through Rachel's. "We weren't really in Tokyo during your wedding. We stayed away because Marcus asked us to," James explained. "He wanted to be sure that nothing, not his disability, not our family's wealth, influenced your decision to marry him." Rachel looked at her husband, understanding dawning in her eyes. "That's why you kept everything secret. You wanted to be sure I loved you for you." Marcus nodded. "When I had my accident, everyone treated me differently. Some people saw only the wheelchair, others only saw the Bennett name and fortune. But you," he smiled, taking her hand, "you just saw me. And that's exactly why you're perfect for this family," Victoria added. "We've watched you these past months, how you've loved our son, supported him, seen him for who he is. That's what this family needs, someone real, someone with a true heart." As they continued their walk, Rachel and Marcus shared their plans for the foundation. James immediately offered to double their proposed budget, while Victoria suggested connecting them with her network of charitable organizations. But first, Victoria insisted, "You two need a proper honeymoon. The house in Maldives is lovely this time of year." Rachel laughed, still adjusting to this new world of casual mentions of private houses in exotic locations. But when she looked at Marcus, she saw the same kind, funny man she'd fallen in love with in room 205. That evening, they sat on the estate's terrace, watching the sunset. Marcus had insisted on using his wheelchair, explaining that some days would still be wheelchair days as he continued his recovery. "Any regrets?" he asked, pulling Rachel onto his lap. "About marrying a man who kept such big secrets?" Rachel pretended to think about it. "Well, I did fall in love with a seemingly middle-class software developer in a wheelchair. Instead, I got a wealthy tech heir who can walk and wants to change the world with me. I suppose I'll manage somehow." Marcus laughed, holding her close. "I love you, Rachel Bennett Thompson. Thank you for seeing me. Just me." "I love you too," she replied, kissing him softly. "Wheelchair or walking, rich or poor, you're the man I chose. Everything else is just details." As the sun set on their new beginning, Rachel and Marcus knew that their love story, built on truth and acceptance, was more valuable than all the wealth in the world. Their future held not just luxury and comfort, but purpose and meaning, a chance to help others while growing together in love.